This chair is so comfortable to sit in, but it is so hard to get in and out of. Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Maddie. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Today I am doing my 2024 best books. My best books of 2024. It's a little bit late, but better late than never. A couple of things before I get started, because you may notice them. Yes, my Christmas tree is still up. Yes, it's nearly the end of January. I need little joys during winter, okay? Just give me this one. It'll be gone before Valentine's Day, I promise. You know what? It'll be gone before the end of the month. The other thing is my nails are horrendous. I'm hoping from this distance, you can't see. I wanted to do a video that was actually a voiceover with my hands. And that's not gonna happen until I figure out the situation. I did gel nails for my wedding and they completely destroyed my nails, so I'm just trying to grow these baddies back. Anyways, I think those are all of the little tiny dumb things that I wanted to tell you before the video. So let's get into this video. 2024 wasn't the best reading year for me, honestly. I didn't have that many 5 stars. I didn't do any of my stats this year. I wasn't tracking well like I was last year in like my spreadsheet and stuff. I am starting to track more this year, but we'll see how far I get with that. So I don't have any like general stats, but just the vibe wasn't very great. It wasn't bad. There was definitely some bangers that I'm excited to talk about, but it was a lot of disappointment because I think I focused a lot on new releases, and the new releases that I ended up reading I just like did not enjoy. So not the best year, but these books that I'm going to talk about were like the top, like the top of the top. However, just to kind of give an idea of how my year went with reading, some of my best books in this pile are 4-star reads. I don't know, they're not 5 stars because they just didn't like hit. The way I rate my books is I need like some sort of connection with them to get a 5-star. That's why my ratings are sometimes weird, because people will absolutely hate a book that I rate a 5-star, or it's like not super well written or something, but if I have an emotional connection to it, then it's a 5-star. And that's not being a water sign. So let's just get into these books. I'm gonna start from like not least, number 10 to number 1, saving the best for last. So the first book that I want to talk about, book number 10 for 2024, is a book I actually own. It's Knight's Edge by Liz Curran. Actually, a lot of the books that are in this list are books that I own, so maybe I've just been in my physical reading era. Anyways, this is Knight's Edge. It is a vampire story, but it's more about a toxic relationship between a mother and daughter. So because my memory is horrible, I'm gonna read you the kind of synopsis, or bits of the synopsis for each book. So Knight's Edge says, having a mom like Izzy meant Mia had to grow up fast. No extracurriculars, no inviting friends over, and definitely no dating. The most important rule, tell no one of Izzy's hunger. One only blood can satisfy. But Mia's in her 20s now and longs for a life of her own. One where she doesn't have to worry about anyone discovering their terrible secret or breathing down her neck. When Mia meets rebellious musician Jade, she dares to hope she's found a way to leave her home and her mom behind. It just might be Mia's only chance of getting out alive. First of all, this cover is stunning. This is why I picked up this book. I didn't really hear anything about it until after I read it, and I don't think that many people love this book as much as I did, because I think they were going in for a vampire story, which this is, but that's not really the main focus. The main focus is more about Mia getting out of a toxic relationship with her mother and separating herself from that. The mother-daughter dynamic in this book is awful. It's really bad, and it's really heartbreaking to read some of the things Izzy, her mom, says and does, and the choices that she makes, and how those choices affect her daughter. And it's really heart-wrenching to read about, but I connected so much with this book. And then also the fact that it's LGBTQ is even better. Like, we love a queer romance. What more do you need? Toxic relationships, vampires, and make it queer. You should read this book. The next book on my list, number 9, I actually thought would be higher when I first read it. I remember being so blown away by it and enjoying it a lot and thinking that it was going to be one of my top books, and it is, but it's just lower on my list than I was expecting, and that is Episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. This book is lots of things. It is a haunted house story. It has a ton of mixed media. It has found footage, and how I would describe this book is it is House of Leaves in a more approachable way. So if you're not reading House of Leaves for the like visceral reaction and the immersiveness and feeling like you've gone crazy and you just want the story, this one would be a good one to read. It's much more approachable and it's more interactive because of the different mixed media. So there's journal entries from all of the different characters. There's like sound bites and interviews. I would highly, highly recommend listening to this on audio. And if you can do both, like pair it with physical and audio, I would highly recommend. That's what I did. And I think that's why I enjoyed it so much, because the audio is a full cast and it was so great. And the sound effects in the audiobook just added to the whole experience. But basically in this book, you're following a group of paranormal researchers, and you have a wide range of kind of personalities represented. Everybody has their own motives for being there. So you have the skeptics, you have the people who need this break. Like there's a lot going on with the characters. So there is still character development in here. That's not what I enjoyed about it, but it is in this book. But they're essentially these paranormal researchers who have a reality TV show where they go and explore haunted places. So that's another element about this that I absolutely loved, was the reality TV aspect. And I think anytime for me horror and reality TV combine, I always end up enjoying it. So this ghost hunting reality TV show goes to this like paranormal research foundation, it's called, and it's known for doing studies around paranormal things, and it's super haunted. So they end up going into this house and exploring it, and stuff happens, and you're reliving their experience through the footage that's found in their diary entries and stuff like that. So highly recommend this book for just the experience of being a fly on a wall for a crazy haunted adventure. This next book I feel like is on everyone's top books of 2024, at least the horror booktubers that I watch, and that is The Eyes Are the Best Part. I have this beautiful edition from Twisted Retreats, but the original cover is also very beautiful. I showed this book on my previous video, but I didn't realize that I was like half showing it because of the camera angle, so I'll just give you a quick like overview of it now in a better frame. It's really pretty, but yes, and then obviously you have the sprayed edges. Gorgeous, gorgeous. The dust jacket I took off because I didn't like it, but anyways, in this book we're following Ji-won after the fallout from her father abandoning their family, and she's living with her mother, and she watches her mother kind of process that loss. And in the meantime, Ji-won's not doing well in college. It's her first year and she is completely failing. So there's a lot of pressure on her. To make everything worse, her mom starts dating this, let's be honest, racist white man who sexualizes Asian women. And that sort of tips her over the edge, understandably. And in between all of this, one night they're having fish for dinner, and her mother explains that eating the fish eyes are good luck, and I think she just takes it too seriously. And so with all this pressure, you're watching her unraveling, and you're witnessing the start of her becoming a badass serial killer. I love this book. I think it was a really, really great debut, and I'm really excited to see what else this author comes out with. The next book in my top books of 2024 is Vita Nostra by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko. And this one's gonna be really hard to explain because I still don't know what it's about. The entire time I was reading it, I was comfortably confused, almost like I had no idea what was going on, but I was curious enough to continue, and I would get little tidbits of reassurance that would kind of help me understand. It's so hard to explain because if I were to try, it would just completely disrespect the way that it was written, and I just wouldn't do it justice. So I'm not going to try and explain what it's about other than the fact that it is a magical school. You're following the main character who is on vacation with their mother, and while they are there, this strange man comes up to her and asks her to do this like weird task. And once she does complete it, he invites her to come to this school. And what happens at the school is so interesting and fascinating, but so confusing and weird. The way that these authors' brain works, I don't know how you could come up with something like this. It's definitely one of the most interesting books I've ever read. I can't even put it in a genre. Fantasy, I guess, sci-fi-ish. It's definitely speculative. Goodreads says that it's fantasy and magical realism, and there is sci-fi there as well. Urban fantasy. So it's all over the place, but it has a little bit of everything, and it definitely keeps your interest, but just be prepared to be confused in a good way. The next book, which is book number 6, is This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. I had this book on my shelves for a while, and I don't know what took me so long to read it. I was so hyped about this book, and it was one of the few last year that I was hyped about that ended up being as great as I thought it was going to be. In this book, you're following Vera and Thiago, and they live in this really weird like place. It's just like a house, but there's weird things that happen to it, and they think it's like haunted. And then very early on, Vera gets killed, and you're following Thiago deal with that grief while also trying to understand what's going on in their house and trying to escape that. There's a part that I want to read that kind of explains what I love so much about this book. But Thiago soon realizes that there's no escape, not from his guilt, not from his anger, and not from the evil hunting him, feeding on his pain, looking for a way into this world. The descriptions of grief in this book, I have never seen done before. I love grief horror. That's one of my favorite like subgenres to read. And the way that this main character expresses their thoughts around death and when a loved one passes, and especially the interactions you have with other people after that, is so well done and so honest. And I think that's something really hard to articulate. Following Thiago trying to process his grief in whatever way he can, while also trying to run away from this dark entity. There's just so many metaphors that you could read into this book that are even just beyond me. And the other thing I loved about this book was the cosmic horror element. I think a lot of the times the complaint with cosmic horror is that it's just too like confusing or out there. And I think this book does a really good job at making it more approachable, and it's still a lot of unknown and confusion, but with the element of grief, I think it balances itself out really well. Overall, I just think this book was really well done. Highly recommend if you're looking for a really good grief horror, or if you're looking for maybe an intro to cosmic horror or dipping your toe in. The next book on my list, book number 5, is Maggots Screaming by Max Booth III. This book being on this list is so freaking random. This was actually a recommendation from my friend Lauren at Happy Haunts Library. I was just looking for a fun audiobook to listen to on my walks, and she recommended this one and said she had a good time with it, and I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. This is easily the best audiobook I listened to last year, and probably one of the best I've ever listened to. I don't know that I would have loved it as much if I didn't listen to it on audio. The characters in this book make the book, and having them deliver a lot of the comments and jokes and like feed off each other wouldn't come through as much in text. So this book is about a father and a son who discover familiar corpses in their backyard. And that's really all the book is about. This book isn't really a plot-driven book. There is a plot, but it's more about the characters and how they interact with each other. This book was so funny that I would actually be like laughing to myself as I was listening to it walking down the street. All of the characters just felt like real people, and especially the one character, the dad's friend, he just feels like the like weird uncle that you know is just gonna say some out of pocket shit and you're just gonna be like, okay, like that's just like Uncle George, like, you know, he's just a weirdo. Honestly, it was just wacky and goofy and I just had a really good time with it. Completely switching gears, the next book on my list, which is book number 4, I believe, is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. And this one's a speculative sci-fi-y book about time. How would I describe this book? How do you describe yourself? A novel of art, time, love, and plague that takes the reader from Vancouver Island in 1912 to a dark colony on the moon nearly 500 years later, unfurling a story of humanity across centuries and space. Yes, however, if I were to read that, I would not want to pick this up. So I don't think that does it justice. It does have time in the past and in the future, but if you're someone that doesn't like to read historical stuff, don't let that turn you off of this. I do not like historical fiction, and this is not really like a historical book. It's based much more in the future. As you're reading this, you're kind of confused how all of these different storylines are going to interact. And eventually a common thread is discovered. And the way that this book is written is so well done. You can tell from the beginning that the seeds were planted and the intention was there from the beginning. And it's just really cool to see it all unravel and all the connections and how things come full circle. The writing in this book is absolutely incredible. I will absolutely be reading more by this author. This was my last read of 2024 and it just shot right up to the top 5 of my list because I was just so blown away. There were so many quotes in this book that I would read and just like pause and let really marinate. 2 quotes that really resonated with me that I wanted to share, but I do see myself rereading this and fully annotating because it absolutely is just gorgeous. But the first quote is, I think as a species, we have a desire to believe that we're living at the climax of the story. It's a kind of narcissism. We want to believe that we're uniquely important and that we're living at the end of history, that now, after all these millennia of false alarms, now is finally the worst that it's ever been, that finally we have reached the end of the world. I love that one because it just makes me feel so comforted because it is such a good reminder that although you feel like the sky is falling and the world is so horrible, history repeats itself. And there are things about right now that are horrible, but I'm sure there's different parts of history that feel like it is the end. And reading that, and as someone that feels like this is the end, it's just really comforting to read. And then literally the last sentences of this book I read and I just sat and I was like, wow, that was a great book. So it says, in those streets, everyone moved faster than me. But what they didn't know was that I had already moved too fast, too far, and wished to travel no further. I've been thinking a great deal about time and motion lately, about being a still point in the ceaseless rush. A still point in the ceaseless rush. Like, that is what I am trying to be. Anyways, this book I love so much. I connected with it so much. And if you're looking for something speculative and very different, I would highly recommend this one. The next book on my list, I am so late to the party on. I know this was so many people's best books of previous years, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I have 2 gay vampire stories on this list. That was not intentional, but we're sensing a theme. So this book is about Dracula's bride, Constanza, I think is her name, and her relationship with Dracula, and realizing that he isn't who she thought he was as he brings more people into their relationship. This book isn't necessarily about specifically Constanza and Dracula together. It's more about Constanza and her relationship with the 2 other people that Dracula brings in, and their relationship with each other and their sense of found family and support and comfort between the 3 of them was so wholesome to read about, and how they kind of leaned on each other through the trauma that they were going through. I also loved this book because I think it did a really great job of showing how insidious abusive relationships can be, and how your love for someone can really blind you to their faults, and just how slippery a slope it can be to make excuses for things that are happening, until one day you wake up and you look at your situation and you're just like, how did I get here? Like, how did this even happen? And I think this book does such a great job of illustrating that, because you're on that journey with these people and you're watching them process that while also trying to figure out how to get away. Aside from the story and the relationships, the writing in this book is freaking gorgeous. I do not have quotes because I feel like I would have highlighted the entire book. This book just felt so personal, and the relationships between Constanza and, I gotta get their names, Alexei and Magdalena, the three of them together, like, I just wanted to hold all of them. All three of them were just so comforting to read about, and I really loved being able to enjoy their relationship as kind of like a fourth person or a fly on the wall. But yeah, this one was very surprising, but I absolutely loved it. And I'm noticing a theme. I'm noticing a theme here of a lot of these books I had no expectation for. And then I'm also noticing a theme of a lot of the new releases that I was really anticipating, I ended up not liking and being disappointed. So maybe it isn't the books, and maybe it's just my expectation around the books. And I just need to go into books with way less expectation. Speaking of no expectation, the next book, which is my second book on the list, is Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. And I think this is going to be very controversial because I know this book is very, you either love it or hate it. And I freaking loved it. I love this book so much. And it's not because it's a good book. And it's not because I love the character, although I do. It is because I have never felt such a visceral reaction to a book before, ever in my life. Reading this book made me so unhinged. I was looking around being like, what can I do to make my life crazy? Like, what can I do? Am I about to go out and just get an impulsive tattoo? Like, what can I do to quench this, like, thirst to just be crazy and unhinged? In this book, you're following Irina. And Irina is a mediocre photographer who photographs men, usually young boys, I think. And there's a lot of power struggle around the way that she photographs these men. And Irina's going through it. Like, she is a horrible person, horrible. But I loved reading about her because she was so fascinating. The whole time you're like, what is this bitch gonna do next? Like, she already did things I could have never thought. What could she possibly do now? And as annoying and frustrating as she is with her self-destructive behavior, she's so addicting. She is so addicting to read about, and I just could not put this book down. I actually read this as a buddy read with Brooklyn from Brooklyn's Library, aka the co-owner of this channel. But we had such a good time with this. I know this was also on her top books of last year, so you're 2 for 2 with this one. I really think you should pick it up and give it a chance. This isn't the best, like, literary book out there, okay? The writing isn't the best I've ever read, but the experience of this book, just go in knowing you're gonna hate the main character, and it's intentional. Like, you're supposed to. So good. Such a good read. The last book, which is actually the best book of 2024 for me, I do not own a physical copy of, which is actually a crime. I think I need to change that this year. But it's a graphic novel, and it's called In by Will McPhail. This book impacted me so deeply. I was not the same after I read this book. And I think that that's something graphic novels do really well, because you have the lightheartedness of the illustrations that they can kind of play around with heavier topics and have a little bit more connection since you have the illustrations. But this book is about our main character who feels like they're just on a hamster wheel and they're very lonely and they feel like they're an outsider in their own life. They feel like everyone else has it figured out, everyone else has their connections and sense of community, and they just can't seem to figure out how to get there. They're just floating through their life and they don't know how to reach the people that they interact with. Man, did I read this at the right time in my life. It felt like I was reading my own story. Like I felt like someone was pulling the thoughts out of my brain and putting them onto a page, and I didn't even realize I was feeling those things. In this book, something ends up happening to our main character, and it kind of makes them realize, maybe a bit too late, how to make those connections. And from there, you're just kind of following that process. This book made me sob. I read it twice in the same month. I read it one single time, and then after a week or two, I had to read it again. And both times it made me like sob. I have made every single person that I interact with read this book. It is so good. It was so unexpected. How I discovered this book, I was literally in the library picking up my holds, and I was just browsing the shelves because I had time to kill, and I just saw it. And the spine, if I can find a picture of it, I'll put it on the screen, is just white with the two letters in green, I and N. And I was like, that is so interesting. Like, say less, I'm intrigued. And that's how I found this book. And so, being the superstitious person that I am, like, I just know that I was meant to find that book at that time. And there's not gonna be a book in 2024 that would top this one. There was no way. I read it in like January, I think, and ever since then, like, nothing could compare because of how deeply I was touched by this book. And I highly recommend, if you are feeling like you are having a hard time making connection, you're just feeling like lonely, like you're around people and you have a sense of community, but you're just feeling lonely in that, I highly recommend reading this book. It'll make you feel so seen. If you do end up reading it, please like comment down below or send me a message or something on Goodreads, because I just love talking about this book and I love hearing people's own experiences with it. So I would love for you to send me a message if you do end up reading it. So those are my best books of 2024, all 10 of them in order. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of them and what your thoughts were, or also let me know in the comments what your best book of 2024 was. I'm always interested to hear other people's recommendations. So I think that's everything for today. If you like this video and you want to support my channel, feel free to give it a thumbs up. It definitely helps me out. And if you want to see more videos like this, definitely subscribe down below, and don't forget to hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I upload. I am trying to get on some kind of schedule again. Who knows? So far so good. But yeah, the notification will let you know when I upload. As always, thank you so much for watching and sticking all the way until the end. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I will talk to you very soon in another video. Bye.